students might typically think of surgery or general practice within medicine, but we help them to explore various different disciplines of medicine as well. And hopefully by this stage, the students have the chance to take more ownership, to develop their knowledge and their understanding. And we do that in conjunction with You Can Be a Doctor with a lot of their events. And I'll let them talk about that later on. By the time they get to F6, we continue that career exploration in a lot more kind of in depth. We help them to reflect on their experiences, because that's a really key part of the application process for medicine. And by that stage, they'll hopefully be at a stage to attend our application events, where we can help them with their personal statements and other things that are involved with the application process. And finally, right at the very end, certainly for our medics, we help them with the transition between secondary school and medical school. So we have some online seminars at the moment where, certainly at Reach Edinburgh, our students are beginning that transition from secondary school to higher education. So hopefully you should know there are 5 medical schools in Scotland, and those are at the University of Aberdeen, Dundee, St Andrews, Edinburgh and Glasgow. And in total there are 34 medical schools in the UK. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to focus on the Scottish medical schools. That's the bread and butter of what we do at Reach. So, as I say, there's 5 medical schools. They're all slightly different, but they're all just as excellent. And at the end of the day, all medical schools will qualify applicants to become a doctor. So when it comes to choosing medical schools in terms of grades and things like that, it doesn't really matter which medical school you go to. Ultimately, that final goal of becoming a doctor is still achievable regardless of where you go to. So they all vary in size, they all vary in teaching methods, and if you've got any questions about that specifically, you can ask Emma and Sophie, our 2 medical students, about that at the end. The typical length of degree is 5 years at Glasgow, Aberdeen and Dundee, so that's the standard length there. For Edinburgh, we are 6 years, and that includes what's called a mandatory intercalated year. And I'll let the students talk about that later on, but basically the intercalated year is when you take a year out throughout your medical degree, and you study for another degree on top of your medical degree. So it's great in terms of career progression and expanding knowledge in there. St Andrews is the outlier for the 5 medical schools in Scotland. The way that that's structured is a 3+3. So you do 3 years preclinical at St Andrews, and then your final 3 years usually paired up with Manchester, but you can also consider other medical schools in Scotland as well, and likewise in other places. So in terms of Reach, you're all joining us from different parts of the country, and these slides we've all sent round to you afterwards. But this gives you a bit of an idea of which different universities cover different geographical areas. So for example, Reach Edinburgh covers the southeast of Scotland, Reach Glasgow covers the west of Scotland, including Dumfries and Galloway, and also the Western Isles, and Reach St Andrews, for example, covers Fife. So what I would recommend is, if you, depending on which part of the country you're in, maybe have a little look at the website for the Reach programme that is within your geographical area, just to kind of familiarise yourself with the programme and also the contacts here, because they're also good for you as careers advisors or teachers to get in contact with. Obviously, you're not going to be experts at this, which is why we're running sessions like this. But if you don't know the answer to questions, then you can get in contact with your local Reach provider, or likewise, You Can Be a Doctor. Now, because the Reach programme is funded by the Scottish Funding Council, we do have some eligibility criteria, and these are widened access criteria that are set out by the Scottish Funding Council. I'm not going to go through them all, but some of the main ones to bear in mind are things like students who are entitled to or in receipt of free school meals. So the student doesn't necessarily need to be claiming free school meals to be eligible to join, and we, certainly at Reach Edinburgh, we would email a guidance teacher just to get confirmation of that for any student who signs up to us. Care experience, living in an SIMD 20 or 40 postcode area, so Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, which hopefully you all know about, young carers, students who are estranged from their family, and also young people who are refugees or asylum seekers in there as well. So anybody in there can sign up to the Reach programme. So let's cover more about the UCAS application process and medical school applications specifically. For anybody who is applying to medical school, typically through UCAS you can apply to 5 different choices of universities or courses. For medical school applications you can only apply to 4 medical schools, but you can use that 5th choice for a backup course. So for example, something like biomedical or biological sciences. The application for medicine is slightly earlier, and hopefully most of you do know that, but the application is the 15th of October, the year before students plan to start. So for example, students that you are working with now who are thinking about going to university in September 2022 will need to submit their UCAS application for medicine by the 15th of October 2021. We never recommend that students apply for either medicine and dentistry, or for example, medicine and vet medicine. And the reason for that is because all these courses are very, very competitive, and the application needs to be very much tailored towards either medicine, dentistry, or vet medicine. And that's where career exploration, that I'll talk about in a second, comes into play. Now, if a student is applying, say, for example, for 2 medical schools and then the rest of their choices are non-medicine courses, the deadline is still the same. So all the UCAS choices need to go off at once. So it's just worthwhile bearing that in mind in terms of the timeline of things that happen. Now, I'm going to touch on the academic entry requirements, and I'm going to make a distinction here, and I'll talk to you about the reason for that in a second. So I'm going to make a distinction between the standard academic entry requirements and the minimum academic entry requirements, okay? So first of all, let's start off with the standard academic entry requirements. Usually, by the end of S5, so that can include S4 and S5, for example, any students who maybe sit higher in S4. So by the end of S5, students are typically asked to have 4 A's and a B in their SQA hires. And to cover all bases, I'd recommend that students would take chemistry, biology, and one of maths or physics. And that helps to kind of spread the load of subjects that they need to be considered at all the medical schools in Scotland. When it gets to S6, we look, well, there's certain exceptions at the University of Edinburgh, but typically to cover all bases for all the medical schools, I'd recommend taking 3 subjects in S6, and those tend to be either 3 advanced hires or 2 advanced hires and 1 hire. So it really depends on what your school offers and what the student feels comfortable with. And at advanced higher level, typically looking for 3 Bs, although for us at the University of Edinburgh, we look for 2 Bs. But there's no specific subjects in S6 that need to be taken. And the reason for that is that medical schools understand that not all schools are able to offer certain subjects at advanced higher level due to timetabling issues. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the standard academic entry requirements. And what I'm going to move on to next are what we'd call widening access offers or contextual offers. And these are usually based on the minimum entry requirements. And these are for students who fit the criteria that I mentioned earlier on for REACH. So these are criteria that the Scottish Government are really trying to focus on widening access to higher education for. The criteria do vary from university to university. I've noted the University of Edinburgh's widening access criteria on there, well, the ones that will be most relevant for everyone in this call tonight, but they do vary from university to university, and some are universal. So for example, care experienced and young people who live in SIMD 20 or 40 postcode areas. Now, if you want to, or if your young people want to, you can check using, for example, our admissions checker on the University of Edinburgh website. But I would always recommend that pupils themselves check directly with universities to see whether they'd be eligible for a widening access offer. And that could make a massive difference to somebody considering applying to university, and it can be a huge game changer for them. So as I've said, the widening access offers tend to be slightly lower on the minimum entry requirements, and for by the end of S5, that's typically 3 A's and 2 B's. For the University of Aberdeen, it's actually a bit lower than that. It's 3 A's and a B. And again, the same required subjects, chemistry, biology, and one of maths or physics should be in there as well. When it comes to S6, again, most places are still asking for 3 B's at advanced higher, in the either 2 advanced hires and the higher, or 3 advanced hires. I've had a look around today just to double check this, and yeah, the University of Edinburgh, we ask for only 2 Cs at advanced higher, which could be, again, a massive game changer for young people. So it's just to kind of bring it to your attention that some of the young people that you do work with might be eligible on slightly lower entry requirements, but we'd always encourage them to aim for the kind of standard entry requirements, just because it's better for them to kind of be working towards something a little bit higher. Now, public service announcement here, and this is something I want to nip in the bud. Students do not need higher English to study medicine. The amount of students that I hear who have been advised to take higher English because they need it for medicine, absolutely not true. As long as they have it to National 5 level, at least at grade B, that's absolutely fine. If students are very scientifically minded, then taking the higher English in S5 might end up dropping them down, for example, if they're not so strong in English and not meeting the grades needed to apply for medicine. They can pick it up in S6 if they want to, but if English isn't their strong point, they do not need to take it in S5. So I just really want to ram that point home there. Now, other things that young people need to think about when applying are things like the UCAT test, so the University's Clinical Aptitude Test. That's usually sat between the summer between S5 and S6, and it's certainly required for all Scottish medical schools. Now, there is an associated cost with it, but that cost can be covered by bursaries, which are available through UCAT. And as I think Sophie and Emma might talk about in their talk, there's loads of free UCAT preparation courses out there, so students don't need to be paying hundreds of pounds for preparation courses, and You Can Be a Doctor themselves have fantastic materials, and they deliver the UCAT workshops that we use for REACH, and all their materials are publicly available on their website. Now, interviews are also a big part of the application process. All Scottish medical schools now interview. Edinburgh was the last medical school to introduce medical school interviews 2 years ago. So there are 3 different types of interviews that students might come across. So multiple mini interviews, MMIs, panel interviews, or assessment days, which we run at Edinburgh. It's kind of a blend between MMIs and panel interviews and a couple of other things in there. And interviews can cover things like career exploration, work experience, can cover medical ethics, and potentially role play scenarios to look at the softer skills that are required to work in medicine and to become a medical student. Now, I briefly want to touch on alternative routes into medicine. I think this is really important at the moment because there are a lot of alternative options out there for young people who maybe haven't quite met the grades from S5 or S6 in school. So there's a couple of things that I've put up here. So we've got Gateway to Medicine programs, and the Gateway to Medicine programs typically are 1-year programs which, if successfully completed, would allow the applicant or the student to progress on to the MBCHB, which is the kind of the 5 to 6 year medicine program at their respective institution. Excuse me. So there's 4 universities in Scotland that run these. So the University of Aberdeen, and that only started a couple of years ago. We've got the University of Dundee, the University of St Andrews, and the University of Glasgow, except their programme is not called the Gateway to Medicine, it's called the Glasgow Access Programme. So that's something that you could look into as well. Now, typically the Gateway to Medicine programmes are aimed at wide and access students and who are kind of slightly below the requirements for the MBCHB. Now I see that Kirsty's asked a question about the typical grades for Gateway to Medicine. It tends to vary, so it can be anywhere between 4 to 5 Bs from S5 or over S5 and S6, to 2 As and 2 Bs over S5 and S6, usually to include 2 science-based subjects, so chemistry and biology, or maybe maths in there. What we'll do is we'll pop a link to all this and we'll send all these round to you, but typically 4 hires is usually what they're looking for these programmes. The other thing as well is graduate entry medicine, and that includes what's called the ScotGem programme, so Scottish Graduate Entry Medicine Programme. That's jointly run between the Universities of Dundee and St Andrews. So that's where the student would go off and do another degree first. So that could be something like biomedical sciences, chemistry, for example. And then as a graduate, they could apply to study medicine at one of the universities in Scotland or through the ScotGem programme there as well. So Susan has asked the question, if someone's rejected, can they go on to Gateway to Medicine? What I'll do, Susan, is I'll make a note of that question, and I think we'll maybe cover them at the end, just so we've got enough time to go through everybody's presentations, and obviously acutely aware of the fact that this is out of hours for you guys, so we don't want to keep you longer than we need to, but I'll make a note of that. My final point there is called the SWAP Access to Medical Studies or Medical Sciences programme. So this is typically aimed at adult returners, so maybe more up the street of the careers advisors amongst you who are maybe working with adults who are thinking about going into medicine. So the SWAP Access to Medical Studies courses are relatively new, and they run at Edinburgh College, Glasgow Clyde College and Glasgow Kelvin College. Very similar to the Gateway to Medicine programmes, it's a one-year access programme specifically for adult returners, and upon successful completion or midway through their SWAP programme, they can apply to MBCHB medicine programmes at any of the medical schools in Scotland. So really that's a massive game changer for people who maybe for whatever personal reasons at school didn't do as well as they wanted to do, have got another opportunity further down the line. Next part I'm going to talk about is career exploration and work experience. So as the medical students and our doctors will tell you about tonight, any type of work experience or career exploration that students can get just now is really beneficial to help them understand the career progression or the length of time it takes to progress in a career in medicine. It's quite a long time and there's a lot of work and dedication involved, so it's really important that the students understand what they're letting themselves into, and also to make sure that it's actually for them. Career exploration includes work experience as part of that, but within career exploration we have things like attending online lectures, we've got loads of them just now, signing up for online courses, so MOOCs, it's massive open online courses, there are loads of them online, and I'm going to give you some links to places that you can signpost your young people to. Reading scientific literature and keeping up to date with current affairs in this COVID era, fantastic time for young people to be keeping up to date with vaccine research, for example, and also looking at other zoonotic diseases, things like bird flu, for example. There are a couple of online work experience programmes available at the moment, and those are 100% accepted in place of physical work experience, and those are from the Brighton and Sussex Medical School and also Observe GP, which is part of the Royal College of General Practitioners. And I can maybe put some links into that later on for you. Now, if you have a pupil who isn't eligible to sign up to the REACH programme, you can put them in contact with You Can Be a Doctor. Although we work closely with them, they are an organisation on their own who do support young people who maybe aren't eligible for REACH, for example. But we at REACH have a pupil resources page where we've basically put a list of any free resources that we can find that are going to be useful for young people. And that includes You Can Be a Doctor's website, which also has a lot of fantastic resources on there. So they're open to anyone from anywhere, regardless of whether they're signed up to REACH. And I would always encourage you to encourage your young people to keep a note of any work experience that they do. And that's really handy for them to reflect on when it comes back to writing personal statements or going to interviews. So if you've got any further questions about the REACH programme, I'll save any physical questions for the end and we'll answer them as a group because we might be able to chip together and cover quite a few different questions. You can drop me an email on reach@ed.ac.uk. I've put my phone number on there, and you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram or Facebook, where we quite regularly post some updates. So that's everything from me. What I think I'll do is I will possibly pass back to either Callum or Paula, and then we'll get to our next speaker. So thanks very much, everybody, and I'll be on hand to answer questions in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Ryan. So I'm Callum, I'm one of the trustees of You Can Be a Doctor, and it was my job to make sure the live stream was nice and smooth tonight, and obviously I've done a great job there. But thank you all for following us across the Blackboard Collaborate. If you've not used this before, then an important thing is the chat function, which you could get by clicking the little purple button at the bottom right. We'll be trying to post some handy links as we go to cite some of the pages on youcanbedoctor.co.uk, but to other places as well, like REACH, and some other links as we go through. Please do post your questions in there as well. I think the more questions from you we have, the more helpful we can make this, and that's really what we're trying to do. Our next speakers tonight are going to be what were supposed to be our first speakers, and that is Emma and Sophie, who are two medical students, one in Glasgow, one in Dundee. and they're going to talk about the kind of application process from the perspective of a pupil and now as a medical student, in terms of how they found that and what they wish their teachers had known. So I'll hand over to Sophie just now.
Hi everyone, can I just check that people can see my slides and can hear me okay?
You're all good, Sophie. We can all hear you.
Great. Okay, so my name's Sophie, and I'm currently a third-year medical student at the University of Dundee and co-president of Dundee Widen Access to Medical School Society. So myself and Emma, as Callum said, are basically going to give you a little bit of a run-through of the application process, but from our perspective, and kind of what we think would be helpful for aspiring medical students when they're going through the application process. So, we are two Scottish medical students, and we're both involved in widening access programmes. We're both from areas in Lanarkshire and attended high schools which have a low progression to higher education, and not very many students going on to study medicine. We wanted to give you a bit of a chat through some of the things that we would have found helpful, as I said, and I think that a point that we'd like to stress here is that we understand that as a parent or as a teacher, you have a lot of other things going on, so we can't expect you to know everything about the application process. But if we can give you a couple of tips and tricks, which we think would be helpful, I think that would be great. So, showing an interest in medicine. So you have a student come to you in junior school who's shown an interest in a career in medicine. Where to start? So I think the first thing to say here is be encouraging. It's quite a big thing to say you want to do medicine, and I think that sometimes you feel quite nervous about coming and saying that to a teacher or to your parents. So be encouraging, and if they've come to you in junior school, you might think, oh, that's a bit early to be thinking about what you want to do at university. But quite often students that want to do medicine potentially think about it a little bit earlier than some other pupils. So again, encourage them to think about, okay, is there any events you could attend? So everyone here today, we all run events for those in kind of junior school, so S3 and S4. And at DWAMS, that's actually more the area we focus on because we think it is really important to run events for these students. The next bit is to kind of say that saying you want to do medicine isn't easy, and it can come with quite a lot of worry and concern. I think quite often in high school you want to kind of fly under the radar and, you know, not really put yourself out there in any more of a way than you need to. So I think saying you want to do medicine can sometimes bring with it some attention that you potentially wouldn't want. So I think just check in on the student and just say, are you doing okay, you know, with your mental health? Socially, are you doing okay? Because there can be a big focus on the academics, but these things are really important as well. So the application process itself. So the first section that Emma and I wanted to cover was work experience, which Ryan's already spoken about quite a bit. But we just want to say that it can be quite a worrying time and quite challenging to get work experience, which I know can be a stress for quite a lot of applicants. And now I think one thing we'd want to point you towards is that almost all of the NHS health boards will have someone appointed to help students find work experience. So you can quite often contact them, you know, through the NHS website or by contacting, you know, your widening access programme in that area. So we could put you in touch with the person in Dundee and Glasgow, etc. A big misconception is that you need weeks and weeks of work experience to be successful. And I know that's certainly something that I thought was true when I was applying, and it's so not. The universities are just looking to see that you've tried to investigate a career in medicine and know that it's what you want to do. And that can be done in ways that Ryan mentioned in terms of attending online lectures or, you know, volunteering with a local charity. And if you can get into a GP practice for a day or the hospital for the day, then that's great as well. With that said, obviously, with the pandemic, all work experience has moved to a virtual platform, which has made things quite different, but it's meant that some different resources are now available. So there's the Brighton and Sussex Medical School platform, which Ryan mentioned, and Observer GP. And at DWAMS, we're also creating a Shadow Medical Student programme, which is due to be released at the end of March. Where basically students will be able to experience what it'll be like to go through the Dundee Medical School curriculum via kind of lectures, workshops, communication skills sessions, and it's all very interactive as well. So there's lots of things coming out, as well as a group in Glasgow who are bringing out a more clinical virtual work experience soon as well. So there's certainly lots of things for students to be getting up to. The next bit's the UCAT. I think one thing to say about the UCAT is it's one of the most challenging parts of the application, and applicants will be really stressed because the exam isn't like any other exam they'll have sat before. It's not content based, it's about how you think, and about how you can read a question and answer it. Quite a big misconception again is that you can't prepare for the UCAT, and I think that that's very much not true. Although you're not learning content like you are for your National 5s and Hires and Advanced Hires, you can learn kind of what the questions are, and even how to use the program can be really difficult. Like the online calculator, I remember thinking, how on earth am I meant to use this? Because you're so used to your own personal one. So I think that that's a big thing as well. It's also really important. You do need a good score to get into a Scottish medical school. So I think that, again, this idea of not being able to prepare for it is very much untrue. We'll want to spend a lot of time preparing for it, and this is kind of something I ran into when I was at school. Was I would potentially be in a free period or something and be studying for my UCAT, and teachers would say, oh, like, should you not be studying for your hires or your advanced hires? And I would kind of have to justify myself and say, oh no, I need to do this extra test. And again, that kind of brought with it a bit of stress. So I think with you all just being here and knowing that the test exists is such a good start. So kind of the last slide for me is just about UCAT resources. So we really wanted to promote the great free resources that are out there. So the UCAT website itself will allow you to get to know the programme and the online calculator, which I was talking about earlier. The You Can Be a Doctor website is great. They literally have tutorials on all the different sections because they are all very different, and they're just such a helpful resource. And Medify, which is an online programme, also has a free bank of questions. There's also some paid resources which can be helpful. So textbooks, such as the 1250 UCAT questions book, is really helpful and has way more questions than you could ever need or want to do. And there's also some other paid courses on the Medify platform and Kaplan, but they do come at quite a cost. So I think that it's something that it's quite personal to the student that's applying. But that's kind of all from me, and I'll pass you over to Emma now. Thanks everyone for listening. Look forward to hearing from everyone in the Q&A later.
Okay, can I just check everyone can hear me all right?
You're all good.
Perfect. Okay, if you could flip to the next slide, Sophie. Fab. Okay, so hello to everyone and good evening. My name's Emma and I am a current Glasgow medical student, and I'm going to be taking over from Sophie just for the last part of this talk. So following on from the UCAT, the next kind of logical step is the personal statement. And obviously, as teachers and careers advisors, you're going to be well versed in what a personal statement is and the importance of it. But for meds in particular, it's just good to know that it is that little bit extra important. It's sometimes used to decide. It's sometimes a deciding factor on whether or not pupils get a place, and it's often used at interview. So when I went along to a couple of my medical school interviews, interviewers actually had highlighted copies of my personal statement sat in front of them, and I was kind of quizzed and almost interrogated on some of the things that I'd written in it. So just encouraging any pupils that you've got to really make sure that they know their personal statement inside out and they're happy explaining further bits and pieces. We'll potentially ask you to read it multiple times, and if you do have time to read it more than once, it would definitely be very, very appreciated. And also encouraging students to have someone from a medical background read it is really helpful, particularly emailing into medical student societies like Medic Inside Glasgow or DWAMS, and a lot of the time we will happily read through it and provide some free feedback based on our own experiences, which I know from working with Medic Insight for a wee while now that pupils tend to find that really, really helpful. So that's something that you could encourage pupils to do. Next slide, Sophie. And the last part of the application process is the interview. There are lots and lots of events run by the various outreach programmes that help applicants prepare for interview. And I think especially with everything being virtual right now, there's very few barriers preventing people from going to as many of these as possible. So really just encouraging pupils to look for them and go to as many as possible would be really helpful. And again, like the personal statement, encouraging students to contact the medical student societies just to find out if either we are running our own events or if there's someone there that they can chat to or ask questions about the interview process. You tend to find that we're all really, really happy to chat back and provide some advice. If you're able to, it is very helpful if you can run mock interviews through school. when I was applying, I did a mock interview with one of my English teachers, and it wasn't really to practice any kind of particular medical questions. It was more just to practice generic interview skills and getting used to sitting down and chatting about yourself and learning how to answer questions in a clear and concise way, because I'd never done anything like that before. And actually just having the chance to sit down and practice for the first time was helpful. So if you are able to run any form of mock interview, it would be very helpful. And just the last little section of our talk is about perceived barriers to medicine. So we were putting this together, me and Sophie sat down and thought about some of the barriers that we faced in applying, one of which is that medicine's just perceived to be very unachievable almost as a career. We were made to feel a little bit mad for wanting to apply to medicine, and that it's potentially only for certain people, and we didn't know anyone who was in medical school or knew any doctors and friends or family. So it definitely felt like a really unachievable goal when I was in high school, but now having started, I know that that's completely untrue. And I think the whole host of outreach programmes that exist across Scotland, run by students, by staff members at university, by doctors, really just highlights that medicine is for everyone. So if you do have any pupils that come to you saying that they're interested in medicine, really to encourage them that it is an achievable thing for them to do. Oh, next, thanks. And there's quite a lot of text on this slide, but it was another fairly big barrier, especially for me when I was considering applying to medicine, is that it's a big misconception that you need a lot of money to study medicine. In Scotland, SAS will cover all of your fees for medical school, despite the fact that it's a longer degree. And even if you decide to do the intercalated year, which is what I'm doing this year, SAS still covers funding for that. And as with any normal degree, you still are eligible to apply for bursaries and loans through SAS. There are also lots of scholarship opportunities available and additional bursaries through each of the universities. So if funding is something that you've got a pupil that's maybe worried about, the money is there if you know where to look for it and to apply for these things. Also, as although it's not completely ideal, as a medical student, it is still practical to balance a part-time job. So having a part-time job is something that I've had the whole way through my time at university, and I have definitely managed to balance doing that and my studies, and it's given me that little bit of extra money. So it's definitely an achievable thing if that's something that pupils are worried about. So many thanks from both me and Sophie for listening, and we hope that you found hearing about some of our excuses as a pupil and now medical student was helpful. We've popped some of the details for Medic Insight Glasgow and DWAMS on the slide there if you want to get in touch with any of us, or you want to put any pupils in touch with any of us, we'd be really happy to. But otherwise, I will hand you back over to Cal for the next talk.
Thank you very much. I think it's an interesting insight from people who've been more recently in the shoes of people actually applying. I think all of us in UKB Doctor came from similar backgrounds, but it's longer and longer ago since we applied. So thank you very much for that talk. Our next speaker is a consultant geriatrician based in Glasgow called Kirsty, and she's going to talk to us about kind of some of the perceived barriers around disability in medicine, and why actually maybe we should be ignoring them rather than paying them so much heed. So I'll hand over to Kirsty just now.
Hi, can you all hear me okay? Can you raise your hands if you can hear me? Great, perfect. Okay, so I am a lot older than these guys. I started medical school, in 2000, so long ago I can't even remember. I don't really have slides. There's not a huge amount of resource out there, but the plan for this talk is essentially that I'll give you a little bit about my own background, so essentially why I've ended up talking about barriers or overcoming barriers when it comes to accessing medicine if you have a disability or a health problem. And then I'll go on to talk about some of the resources that you can perhaps use if you do have students who have health problems, disabilities, and they're keen to access medicine. Of course, when I'm talking about disabilities, we're talking about physical disabilities, we're talking about hidden disabilities, mental health problems, chronic health problems, and anything acute that might pop up along the way. So from a professional perspective, as I say, I'm a consultant geriatrician. I work in Glasgow Royal Infirmary, I work in Gartnavel, and I work in the Beats in West of Scotland Cancer Hospital. So I have a really busy clinical job, although for the past year I've essentially been on COVID wards, so I've become a COVID doctor. Other things that I am involved in, so I was involved in coordinating all the junior doctor rotas and education and wellbeing in our department for a few years. So I'm very well versed in kind of what you have to do to support junior doctors through medicine. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm currently the subdean, one of the subdeans in the University of Glasgow Medical School. It sounds a lot posher than it is. Essentially, I, along with one of my colleagues, coordinate the education for students coming through the north of the city hospitals, as well as their examinations, again, ensuring that their standard of education is up to scratch and their well-being taken care of. Within that, I'm also involved in applications for medicine, so I am trained in doing interviews, and I do interview medical or school students who are applying to medicine. And finally, I'm interested in improving the way in which medicine is accessible to people. So I am a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, and I'm on their Inclusion Advisory Board. So that's my kind of role on a professional basis. But on a personal basis, I have cerebral palsy, so a lifelong disability. I was born premature. It affects my lower limb mobility, so my walking. I walk unaided, but would say, for example, need to use a banister to get up and down stairs. So I do have a background of having a disability, and when I went on to apply to university, as I say, it was a long time ago, my guidance teacher told me that I needed to recognise my limitations and not apply to medicine, told me I would be better working in an office. So I'm quite glad I ignored him, because I absolutely love my job. Even in the midst of a pandemic, I absolutely wouldn't want to do anything else. And I would love to make sure that people who have an enthusiasm to study medicine don't have barriers put up for reasons that we can overcome. So, I mean, having a chronic health problem, a disability, it's not unusual. About 18% of the working population will have a disability. About 1 in 4 people will have mental health issues through their life. So we don't want to ignore that group and lose out on potentially talented workforce by putting barriers up for them. The first resource that I would probably point you towards, and Cal will put them up in the chat, is the Disabled Doctors Network. That is essentially run by people from FY level, so very junior doctor level, right up to consultancy, who have varying degrees of disability. And on that website, they have lots of information from applying to medical school right through to retirement. And so I'll just highlight a couple of points from that. So medical schools are encouraged to provide information for disabled students. So if you do have a student who has a disability or a health problem, get them to look up the university website. If they don't find that information, then give the university a phone. Universities are really, really keen to widen access to medicine. So I think the fear from people applying to medicine is that if they speak to the university about it, that will mean their application won't be considered in the same way, and that's not true. But what is important is that they are open, they're transparent, and then we can really solve problems and help them along. So that's the first thing. GMC aren't involved in the application process per se, but what they are involved in is setting the sort of regulations of who gets to become a doctor and what standards you need to meet. So that's the sort of skills and competencies. Now, those skills and competencies are non-negotiable. You have to meet those skills and competencies by the time you graduate. That's what's deemed necessary to ensure good clinical care. So again, if you have a disability, if you have a health problem, having a look at what these skills and competencies are is very useful to see if you think you'll be able to meet them. But a sort of caveat to that is you might look and think, oh my goodness, I won't be able to do that because of my disability. Don't automatically think that. Contact the university, because there's lots of ways in which we can overcome difficulties, and reasonable adjustments, just like in all forms of employment, do have to be made. So look at those, but if you have any concerns, then do contact the university. I am contacted not infrequently by kids that are keen to apply to medicine and have physical disabilities, and I always get asked about running to cardiac arrest calls. I did 9 years of hospital medicine, about 5 years of them were medical registrar training. I held the cardiac arrest call. I am a useless runner. There are ways and means of which you can overcome things without jeopardising patient safety, because ultimately we would never jeopardise patient safety. The other document which is worth looking at, it's 110 pages. You probably don't want to read 110 pages, I haven't, but it's called the GMC Welcomed and Valued Supporting Disabled Learners in Medical Education and Training. And that's a really positive document, I think, for young kids to look at, because it says, first of all, that they firmly believe that disabled people should be welcomed to the profession and valued, and that's the first thing that that document says. Also says that no health condition or disability by virtue of its diagnosis prohibits an individual from studying or practicing medicine. Now, having a disability, having a health problem is not per se a fitness to practice issue or concern at all. I have never had to, I have to disclose my disability to the GMC when I became a consultant, but not because it was a fitness to practice issue. It would only become a fitness to practice issue if it was impacting on the way that I could look after my patients safely. And again, what you would look at first is what adjustments could be made to your job. Finally, as I say, I did sort of mention the fact that I do medical school interviews. And I think when we are talking to kids that have come from diverse backgrounds, we need to look at what makes them stand out and the positive things that they have. So what I would say is that we are really, really keen as a profession that the medical profession is diverse and it represents the population which we serve. So within the population we serve, we have people with disabilities, we have people with health problems. And it's useful if you have that understanding and that empathy. So that's a positive thing that kids from that background have, that they could talk about at medical school interviews, could talk about in their application. What we're looking for really in the medical school interview is that the school student has a really clear understanding of what medical school involves and what being a doctor involves, warts and all the sort of negative side of medicine as well. And I guess if you're coming from a background where you have got health problems, you have got disabilities, you've been exposed to hospital settings, you probably do have a good understanding. Also, the other thing is, I guess, we talk a lot about resilience, especially during the pandemic. There's been a lot of discussions about that. So you've already probably overcome a lot of barriers and challenges. And again, these things are all really positive points that we would look favourably upon in an interview. And obviously, we want to ensure that people are really enthusiastic about doing medicine or doing it for all the right reasons. And it might be the experiences that you've had that have led you on to wanting to pursue a career in medicine. So there's lots of positive aspects that we can take from for people with disabilities and health problems onto their applications to medicine. Of course, I'm sort of painting a really, really rosy picture here. It's not all roses. In the 1st of December last year, so 2020, the BMA produced their sort of disability or disabled doctors survey, and there were some really depressing statistics in that, and I'll just highlight some of them. So half of doctors or medical students felt that reasonable adjustments hadn't been made. About a third worried about telling people about any conditions they had for being looked upon unfavourably. So obviously within the medical profession, there's still things that we need to do, and we are really working on that, as I say, in the colleges, as the inclusion advisory boards, within the health board, we're doing a lot of work. But I have to say that my experiences of working in, my experiences in medical school, my experience of working within the NHS grew from FY1, which is the junior doctor level, right through to consultancy, has been nothing but positive. I've never really faced any sort of negativity towards myself or around about my disability. So I think the main thing to highlight is that if you have a student who has a disability or a health problem and they're concerned about applying to medicine because of that, it isn't a barrier to applying, and contacting the university, discussing with the university is really valuable, and we would no doubt value their experience as well. So I think that's my talk.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Really, really interesting talk, and hopefully find those resources that we've linked to in the chat helpful as well. We're going to come on to our final speaker of the night, so we're going to move on quite swiftly because I appreciate we're overrunning a little bit already. That's Paula, who's another trustee of You Can Be a Doctor. She's going to give you a bit of an overview of the support that not just You Can Be a Doctor, but all of the organisations here tonight and a couple of others can offer your pupils, as well as some tips on how to access them. I'll give you a tip in advance. There's quite a lot of organisations, as it turns out, so it does get a little bit confusing, but we'll try and keep things as simple for you as we can and simplify things again at the end. I'll hand over to Paula.
Hello everyone, so can I first just check that you can see my slides and you can hear me? Yes, okay, smashing. So hello everybody. Oh, I can see all the hands going up, smashing. So my name's Paula. You've met me before on the other live stream, sorry about all that. I'm a member of the You Can Be a Doctor board. I'm also a doctor working down in Newcastle at the minute, but I'm also Lanarkshire born and bred, so go Lanarkshire for having lots of people on here this evening. And my mum's a teacher, so I can understand how difficult it is sometimes for teachers to kind of navigate all the drama of applying to medical school, because I know even my mum found it a bit difficult when I was applying. So what we're going to do is try and summarise a little bit about what the widening participation societies across Scotland do. What You Can Be a Doctor tries to do is we're not affiliated with any specific university or anything. We are trying to have a bit of an overview of all of the organisations, and we're trying to act like a kind of focal point to point you in the right direction towards people, so that you're not confused about how many different organisations there are. What we're going to talk about in this talk, I'll try and be quick because I know that we're running a wee bit over, is basically just some general events that we run for younger years, or that are suitable for all pupils. At the minute, our sort of younger years events have been put a little bit on hold because a lot of those for us and for TWAMs were in-person events, and they've been more difficult to translate to online, but we're going to see what we can do for that. Then I'll sort of go through a kind of S4 to S6 events timeline. I'll go from August to August and tell you from August to August what events we run, when, roughly, and how you can attend them. I'll give you a wee brief overview of the website, and then at the end we'll do our Q&A with everybody and see if you've got any questions. So one of the first events that we run that's kind of open to everyone / for the younger years is our Introduction to Medicine event, which is for S1 to S3s. I don't know if anyone came along to the one that was run in December. It was basically an online live stream event which went swimmingly, unlike tonight's live stream, where basically we had talks from medical students, junior doctors, senior doctors, and from Reach Edinburgh about how to apply to medicine from more of the kind of younger years aspects. So it was available to everyone. You could just log on via the You Can Be a Doctor website, and it was an opportunity for kind of younger pupils to talk a little bit about what medicine was like, ask us some questions suitable for pupils and for their parents. So if you wanted to replay it, it is on our YouTube channel. I've left a wee link here, but the link to our YouTube channel is also on our website. We've not planned another one at the minute, Kirsty, in terms of S1 to S3 events, but you could replay the one that we already did, and then we're maybe going to try and do them as an annual thing. Okay, folks. So next event that we do is run by DWAMs. So this is DWAMs' Chat with a Medical Student events. So these are really, really good informal events that are running every fortnight. So you can see the dates on there, 24th of Feb, 10th of March and 24th of March from 6 to 8 p.m. So they're online drop-in sessions, and basically if you go onto the You Can Be a Doctor website and go to the events page, you'll see those different dates and you can go on there and get ticket access. It's basically just a drop-in session, really informal, where there's going to be some medical students from Dundee University where either parents or pupils can drop in and sort of ask any questions that they have about what being a doctor's like, or what's medical school like, or how was your UCAT, how did you find it, anything they can ask. So those are really good informal events just to kind of easily contact a medical student to talk about any questions. I'm sure teachers could drop in as well. I'm sure DWAMs wouldn't mind that too. They could be, so it could be S4 to S6. I mean, I suppose if younger pupils are interested, S2, S3, I think, like Sophie said earlier on, I know when I was applying for medical school, like I was started thinking about it when I was in S2, and I'd really like to have one of these chat with a medical student, even if the questions aren't as intensely about the application process as they would be for S4 to S6. Even just some basic questions from S2s S3s would probably be fine. Then we've got Meet the Medics. So Meet the Medics ran in autumn. It was more for kind of S4, S5, S6, so I've sort of probably put it in the wrong section, so sorry guys. It was online this year again, and what it was basically a kind of Google Classrooms event where we had small group discussions between a group of school pupils and some medical students and doctors, where they would rotate through every 10 to 15 minutes between different doctors. And they would have a chance to talk to the doctors and the medical students about like what their life was like and any questions they had. So I suppose what we're basically trying to do is kind of break down that barrier between people being able to talk to people who are medical students and doctors, because I know I didn't know MD when I was applying. So we're hoping to run that again next autumn, although we might run it another one again in April, April, May time, depending on whether there's interest or not. Again, it'll just be online. Sign up via the youcanbeadopted.co.uk website on the events page. That's basically where most things should be. We've just kind of launched on developing the young workforce. So basically, anytime if you want us to talk at your careers fair, if you want us to just do a talk to some interested pupils, that would be fine. I know I did a talk for, I think it was Broughton, just a kind of group of pupils, just who were interested in knowing what medicine was like. So anything, if you want to contact us via developing the young workforce, apparently Cal says that we should be on there. So we'd be happy to speak to at any careers fairs or speak to a small group of interested pupils, just a doctor or a medical student from within our collaborative group. So the other ways that we're probably whammering on about the S4, S5, S6 timeline, I know Ryan had a much nicer diagram than me, but basically, you know the chat, S4 is national fives with some work experience, probably trying to do some volunteering. S5 is hires. Then you have to start thinking about your personal statement in UKCAT early, towards the kind of April, May time. You probably need to start thinking about whether you're going to apply for medicine and whether you're going to do these things. And then you've got UKCAT before October, personal statement to write, and then you apply on the 15th of October every year in S6 with the interviews in December to February. So I'm going to try and tell you about our S4 to S6 events timetable and then show you where they would sort of fall under, which ones would be appropriate for which year, although it's kind of flexible. So we ran a How to Get Into Medicine event in autumn this year, which was a live stream. Again, it should hopefully be available via our YouTube page. I think I've just seen your question, Lorraine. What I'll do is I'll leave that for Cal about the developing the young workforce. Oh yeah, he's answered. So How to Get Into Medicine was autumn 2020. It was a live stream event, which also went very well. Interview with doctors and medical students. Again, just talking about life as a doctor, but with more of a focus on what being a medical student is like, what the interview process is like, and talk about intercalated degrees, which is the research opportunity that you get to do when you're at different medical schools that most of us are tending to do at the minute, especially because in Scotland, because it's free, so you don't have to pay for it. So it's just to kind of tell students a little bit more about that and what opportunities they have. Lasts for about an hour and a half. And again, sign up via the You Can Be a Doctor events page. So that's in autumn. Then we've got personal statements. So they're due 15th of October every year. Everyone has to write one, and like it's been mentioned before, they are more important when you're applying for medicine. They form a big part of your application. They'll be marked and then they'll be discussed at your interview. So it's really important to have a strong personal statement, and I know that was something that I'd struggled with. I think what we find is that it's sometimes difficult to look at just one personal statement and be able to compare it with other ones. If you've only got one student applying for medicine from the school, sometimes their personal statement might seem great, but then when you compare it to other people's personal statements who are applying, you might realise that actually they've got much stronger personal statements. So I think we're happy to offer a personal statement check-in service. We checked lots of personal statements this year via advice at youcanbeadoctor.co.uk. It's because we get a few in, so then it's easy to kind of compare and see what the standard is among them. And again, like DWAMS and Medic Insight said, there's all sorts of different services that everybody would be happy to check in with personal statements, because I know it's sometimes something that people can find a bit difficult and daunting. So we're definitely there to check personal statements if you just would like to have a second eye on them who can look at it maybe from a bit more of a medical perspective. Mock interviews is our next thing. So we run those in the winter. So we ran them November, December 2020 this year. It's for pupils in S6 who are from state school. Our mock interview event this year was only for pupils eligible for Reach Edinburgh, because we collaborate quite closely with them. So what we did was we ran an online event via Google Classrooms, and it basically just was a mock interview in the same style that they would have had, because most of the interviews were actually online, running through 5 stations marked by doctors from foundation level all the way up to consultant in a variety of specialties. And it's just an opportunity to practice and get feedback in a bit more of a formal setting. We've got very good feedback from that, and we're hoping that we might be able to expand it to not just Reach Edinburgh pupils, although that's what we offer at the moment. But we have done mock interviews for pupils who've just emailed us. I ran a few of those this year for some keen pupils who just emailed us. So again, if you've got a keen pupil who would like a mock interview ran, you can email advice@youcanbeadoctor.co.uk and we can get something set up for them too. Introduction to Anatomy, so we've just ran that just a couple of weeks ago. It was an online live stream where we basically collaborated with the University of Edinburgh Anatomy Department. Bit of a different spin on medicine, but you got a chance to ask questions about what anatomy is, learn a little bit more about the human body, about what it's like to be an anatomy demonstrator. And then it linked into what we're running at the minute, which is like an online anatomy workshop where we've got some medical students and school pupils working together via Google Classrooms to do a project on a different part of the human body, and those are all going to be marked by the anatomy demonstrators from the University of Edinburgh Anatomy Department. Again, we're only running that through Reach Edinburgh at the minute because it's just a bit of a pilot programme, but if it goes well, it's something else that we hope that we can maybe expand to other pupils if there's interest for it. So we'll see how that goes. It's only just started running on Friday, these classroom events. DWAMs, I've released some due for release, March 2021. You're hearing about it here first. So DWAMs, I've created an amazing online resource for work experience. As we've mentioned before, work experience is sometimes the thing that people find most difficult to get. I know that I found it a real challenge, and actually the pandemic has probably made it easier for people who don't have access to doctors to be on a more even playing field, because the thing that you need to do now is try and get online work experience. So DWAMs are planning to release Shadow a Medical Student. So once it's available, it's going to be on the youcanbeadoctor.co.uk website. Sound like a broken record here, but everything should hopefully be on there. And it's basically going to be a series of interactive lectures, workshops, communication skills sessions, where the pupils will basically follow a medical student and be able to kind of click through a different scenario, and depending on what answer they click, it'll take them to a different part of the scenario, and it's basically supposed to kind of simulate different years of the medical curriculum at Dundee University so that they can really see what it's like to be a medical student. It's a really amazing piece of work, due for release in March 2021, so that's something to point your school pupils towards if they're thinking about a plan to medicine next year. It's going to be released on our website. If you've got any questions about it as well, feel free to email us and we can put you in touch with DWAMs, or DWAMs' email is on the other slides from Sophie and Co. Then we've got Medic Insight. So Medic Insight, there's multiple different Medic Insights. There's Medic Insight Dundee and Medic Insight Edinburgh, but we only collaborate at the minute with Medic Insight Glasgow, although they all run very similarly. So Medic Insight Glasgow do a day and a week programme. So the day programme is running this year from the 6th to 7th of April. It's for S4 pupils from the West of Scotland region only, and you apply via a form on the Medic Insight page. At the minute it's virtual, like everything. Unfortunately, applications are closed for this year. They tend to open at the end of January and close early February, so we've sort of missed the boat for that, unfortunately. But it's basically a programme, full day for S4 pupils, where they'll hear some talks from medical students and doctors. Again, another opportunity to talk with medical students and doctors about what it's like. So that's another good thing that we've got available. Then we've got some more virtual work experience, which is due to be released. So this is from MOGWI, which is the Medicine Outreach Glasgow Widening Access Initiative, many acronyms in the widening participation world. And it's going to be released via the NHS GDC Work Experience website, but we'll advertise it on youcanbeadoctor.co.uk as well once it's available. We're hoping that it's going to be available again within the next month or so. This could be for anyone between 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Neil, I'm coming on at the week. Anyone from S3, S4, S5 considering applying to medicine can just log into this online work experience, and it was basically filmed in the NHS Louisa Jordan, which they built for COVID, and it's a mock ward round which basically simulates what it would be like to be a doctor working on the ward with simulated patients, simulated doctors, as well as interviews with staff and students. And it also talks a little bit about things which often aren't mentioned, so like managing errors in healthcare and simulation training. So it's going to be another really good resource which we'll hope to advertise on our website whenever it's available. Then we've got Medic Insight Week, so that's June 2021. It's for, again, virtual like everything at the moment. It's for S5 pupils from the west of Scotland, Glasgow region only. Applications, unfortunately, again, are closed for this year, but it's a week-long programme of events, talks and workshops delivered by medical students and doctors. A bit more of an in-depth dive into what it's like to be a doctor, and opportunity to experience problem-based learning, which is a big part of the Glasgow curriculum, I know, and that we also used when I studied at Edinburgh. So to learn a little bit more about what's actually going to be like to study. So it's a really useful and very good week, and I think a lot of the pupils who attend these sessions find them extremely useful. So unfortunately closed for this year, but something to keep in our calendars that it's open January, February. So we talked a little bit about UKCAT, or I call it UKCAT because I'm old, now it's called UCAT. You set the UCAT any time between August and October, sorry. You can choose when you sit it, and basically it's a test where it tests how you think. It's a bit difficult to study for, like people have said. Sometimes people think they can't study for it, but actually you can. So William, one of our board members, has actually created a really useful and good course which is available on our YouTube channel, which has got 20-minute videos covering every single section of the UKCAT, which should be useful for pupils to use those videos even if they can't attend the course. The course is currently only available again for Reach Edinburgh at the minute, but this course is due for July 2021, so depending on how we can expand things, we're going to see whether or not we might be able to open it up to pupils from out with Reach Edinburgh, but that'll just, we'll have to keep you posted on that. So the best thing to do would be to just keep an eye on our website, and you can always email us on advice@youcanbeadoctor.co.uk if you've got any questions about that. So this is my kind of little S4, S6 timeline, which basically is sort of put where things tend to sit in terms of our events with which year they should be in. Obviously this is flexible depending on what the pupils want, but certain things like the UKCAT course and the mock interviews, personal statements are only going to be available at certain times depending on where the pupil is in their journey towards applying to medicine. So I talked a little bit about Medic Insight Glasgow, but there's also Medic Insight Dundee and Medic Insight Edinburgh. They run similar programmes to Medic Insight Glasgow, so it would be worth contacting them directly to get a little bit more information on whether or not they're running the day programme and the week programme this year. I'm not totally sure how they run. And then Ryan's already given us these helpful email addresses for all the different Reach programmes in Scotland. So youcanbeadoctor.co.uk is our website. I think, as I said before, we're trying to simplify things a little bit in the widening participation world, because sometimes it can be hard to know who to ask for certain things. Basically, our website tries to kind of summarise everything into hopefully all that you would need to apply to medicine. We're trying to put all of our events on there and all of the events from the different groups that we collaborate with. So this is basically just a kind of brief thing of all the different things that we offer. So welcome to kind of explore the website and see what we've got on there. And then also we've got our advice@youcanbeadoctor.co.uk email address. I would basically just email that with any questions you've got about anything. Even if you think it's not us that directly do this, we can pass you on to the right people. So just give us an email if you would like to. And then that's me. You'll be sick of my voice now, but I just kind of linked to our email address and to our website again, and then I'll hand back to Cal and we can maybe start answering some of the questions if people have got.